Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something really, really important.
We are. It's these growing concerns around kids' mental well-being, especially now in the digital age.
Yeah, and this is aimed right at you, the learner. We know you want the key takeaways without getting totally bogged down.
Exactly. The goal is to really unpack the main ideas from the book, The Anxious Generation.
Get a clear picture of what it's arguing, what the core issues are, sort of a shortcut to getting informed on something vital.
hmm And the big question, really, that the source material keeps coming back to is this. Is the smartphone actually the main cause, the culprit behind these mental health struggles in young people?
Right, so we're digging into that, mainly using a summary we found of Jonathan Haidt's book, trying to get the what and the why.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so the central argument, what the source says the anxious generation puts forward, is pretty direct.
It is. It basically argues that, the huge rise of smartphones and this big shift in what kids actually do
How they spend their time.
are major drivers of the mental health crisis we're seeing.
It talks about a great rewiring of childhood. I found that phrase really striking.
Yeah, moving from like a play-based childhood
Running around building stuff.
to a much more phone-based existence.
And the timeline seems crucial here, according to the source.
It really is. The material points out that if you look before the early 2010s, say 2010, 2011, mental health issues in younger kids, preteens, teens, they were relatively stable.
No big red flag suggesting what was coming.
Not on this scale, no.
Mm.
But then things really changed.
Yeah, this is where it gets pretty sobering. Around 2012, the data starts showing this significant climb.
In reported problems like depression, anxiety.
And also increases in diagnoses for things like ADHD, bipolar disorder, specifically in Gen Z.
And sadly, also big jumps in self-harm and suicide rates.
The numbers mentioned from the U.S. National Survey on Drug Use and Health, they really make you stop and think.
They do. Like reported depression in girls, up
Yeah.
145% since 2012. That's more than double.
And for boys, even higher, 161%. It just shows the sheer scale of this shift.
And it's not just self-reporting, right? The source also mentions actual diagnoses among university students.
Yeah, anxiety diagnoses up 134%.
Depression diagnoses up 110%.
Even ADHD and bipolar diagnoses saw big jumps, like 72% and 57% respectively.
So across the board, you see this really concerning spike starting around that 2012 mark.
And the most serious outcomes, too. ER visits for self-harm among girls.
A shocking number, up 188%.
And suicide rates for girls, up 167%.
The numbers for boys are lower, percentage-wise, but still deeply concerning. A 48% increase in those ER visits and a 91% jump in suicide rates.
So what was happening around that time? The source makes a strong connection to, well, smartphones.
Exactly. The timing is hard to ignore. The iPhone launches 2007.
But it took a few years for them to become really widespread.
Right. Around 2010 onwards, you see that massive adoption. By 2016, the source says 79% of teens had one.
Wow. And even younger kids, 28% of 8 to 12-year-olds had one back in 2016.
And fast forward to 2022 PE research data. Nearly half of teens saying they're online almost constantly.
So this phone-based childhood the source talks about, it really seems to take hold right alongside these rising mental health issues.
Which leads to the next big question the book explores. If kids are spending all this time on phones, what are they not doing? What's being lost?
The deprivations, as the source calls them. It's not just about what phones add, but what they might be taking away.
The first one highlighted is free play, unstructured play.
Just messing about, figuring things out on their own. Why is that considered so fundamental?
Well, think about it. That's how kids historically developed really crucial skills. Social skills, negotiating with peers.
Learning how to handle disagreement.
Exactly. Assessing risks like, can I climb that tree? Building friendships, using their imagination. A phone-based childhood is often very structured, very designed by others.
Right, it doesn't have that same space for spontaneous learning and problem solving that just happens when kids are left to their own devices. Literally, their own devices, not digital ones.
Precisely. Building a den, organizing a game.
Yeah.
That stuff teaches you things scrolling just can't.
Okay, the second deprivation mentioned is attunement. That's about emotional connection.
Yeah, attunement is that subtle back and forth dance of social interaction. Learning to read facial cues, understanding tone of voice, taking turns in conversations.
All that stuff you learn naturally interacting with parents, caregivers, other kids.
Yes, those synchronized interactions are vital for building emotional intelligence, empathy, social skills.
And the argument is that heavy social media use gets in the way.
Well, the source points to data like, after 2014, A third of preteen girls spending over 20 hours a week online. That's a huge chunk of time not spent in face-to-face interactions where that deeper attunement happens.
Digital interactions often lack that richness, that immediate feedback.
They can, yeah. They're often missing those nonverbal cues that are so important.
Okay, and the third deprivation, traditional social learning. How's that different now?
So historically, kids learned a lot by just watching adult and older kids in their community.
Hmm.
Seeing how people handle real-life situations, solve problems, build relationships.
Learning from real role models.
Right. Online, especially on social media, what they often see are these highly curated, often unrealistic portrayals of life and success.
The highlight reel.
Exactly. And success gets measured by likes, followers, which is a very different and maybe distorted way of learning about value and achievement compared to observing real people in your community.
That really makes sense. It shifts the whole frame of reference. The source also brings up parents and this kind of paradox in parenting styles.
This is a really interesting point. The book suggests parents have become, maybe understandably, quite overprotective when it comes to the physical world.
Worries about traffic, crime, letting kids walk to the park alone.
All valid concerns, of course.
Yeah.
But the flip side, the book argues, is that we might be simultaneously underprotective in the online world.
Not fully grasping the risks there.
Perhaps. The dangers of social media algorithms, addictive game design, the curated realities, cyberbullying. It's a newer landscape, harder to supervise.
So it's like we're helicopter parenting in the park, but maybe letting them wander freely through a potentially risky digital city.
That's a good analogy. And this overprotection in the real world, even though it comes from a good place,
Might actually backfire slightly.
well, it could hinder the development of things like resilience, independence, problem solving. Kids need to encounter small challenges, figure things out, maybe even fail sometimes to build those skills.
Learning to navigate minor risks, like getting a bit lost or resolving a squabble with a friend without an adult immediately stepping in.
Exactly. Those are crucial learning opportunities that too much shielding can take away.
Okay, so we've got these deprivations, less free play, less attunement, altered social learning, and this parenting paradox. How does the source say smartphones directly impact mental health? What are the mechanisms?
Right. It outlines a few key ways. The first one is pretty straightforward.
Mm.
Social deprivation.
But kids are often with their friends when they're on their phones, aren't they?
Physically, yes. But the source argues that even when together, constant phone use reduces the quality and quantity of genuine face-to-face interaction.
That feeling of being alone together.
Precisely. You can be in a room full of people but feel disconnected if everyone's absorbed in their screen. That lack of real engagement can definitely fuel feelings of isolation.
Okay, mechanism 2, sleep deprivation. This feels like a big one.
Oh, it's huge. And teenagers are already biologically wired to have later sleep cycles. Add smartphones into the mix.
Blue light, endless scrolling, fear of missing out.
Exactly. Late-night social media use messes up sleep patterns badly. And lack of sleep is directly linked to so many problems. Depression, anxiety, irritability, aggression, poor concentration, poor self-regulation.
It affects basically everything.
Fundamentally, good sleep is just non-negotiable for mental health. And phones are a major obstacle for many kids.
Then there's attention fragmentation, the constant pings and notifications.
Yeah, our brains aren't really designed for that constant interruption. The source mentions an average of, 11 notifications per hour for teens.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And these platforms are designed to that, to grab and hold your attention. It's the attention economy.
So it fragments focus, makes it harder to concentrate deeply on anything.
Absolutely. It hinders deep thinking, critical analysis, even just reading a book. And interestingly, the source notes that even just having your phone nearby, even if it's off or face down, can be a distraction.
Wow. Just its presence.
It pulls cognitive resources.
Okay, and the final mechanism mentioned is addiction.
Yes, and let's be clear. These apps and devices are often engineered using behavioral psychology to be addictive.
Those little red notification badges, the infinite scroll.
Variable rewards like likes and comments. You don't know when you'll get one, so you keep checking. That triggers dopamine release in the brain.
The reward chemical.
Exactly. It creates a compulsion loop. And the source even mentions withdrawal-like symptoms if kids can't use their phones, getting moody, anxious, trouble sleeping.
It definitely sounds like addiction for some, so this is all quite concerning. But the source does offer some potential solutions, some guidelines based on the book.
Thankfully, yes. It tries to offer a path forward, starting with the very youngest, ages 0 to 5.
What's the advice there?
Pretty clear-cut. Minimize digital devices as much as possible. The focus should be squarely on free play, lots of parent-child interaction, real-world experiences.
Playing with blocks, singing songs, running outside.
Yes, and encouraging play with other kids, different ages too, to build those social and problem-solving muscles. Really lean into that play-based foundation.
Makes sense. What about for primary school kids, say 6 to 11-ish?
The focus shifts a bit towards encouraging independence in the real world. Little things, like walking to school or a local shop if it's safe and appropriate.
Building that autonomy.
Right. And still prioritizing unstructured playtime over constantly scheduled activities. Maybe parents collaborating to make sure there are safe spaces for kids to just play.
And screens.
Definitely limiting screen time. The source suggests maybe under 2 hours a day as a benchmark, and using parental controls effectively on any devices they do use.
Okay, now the tricky zone. Preteens and teenagers.
Yeah, this is where it gets complex. The main emphasis here is on building real-world competence and skills before getting fully immersed online.
Like what kind of skills?
Things like learning to cycle safely, using public transport, taking on chores and responsibilities at home, learning to cook simple meals, maybe having a part-time job, engaging in outdoor activities.
Stuff that builds capability and confidence in the physical world.
Exactly. The book apparently suggests delaying full smartphone access and social media until maybe around age 16.
16, wow, that would be a huge shift from the current norm.
It would. And even then, the suggestion is clear family rules, open communication, and parents actively monitoring for signs of addiction or negative mental health impacts.
Why do you think those kinds of guidelines waiting until 16 are so tough for families right now?
Oh, I think the social pressure is enormous, isn't it? Kids feel excluded if they're the only one without a phone or not on TikTok or Instagram.
Slow is real.
Definitely. And let's be honest, phones can be convenient for parents too. Communication, keeping kids occupied.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to swim against the tide.
No, it's really not. The source also mentions 4 specific rules the book proposes while acknowledging their aspirational, perhaps.
Yeah. Tough sells maybe, but put forward as ideals. What are they?
Okay, number 1, no smartphones before high school.
Right.
Number 2, no social media before age 16.
Okay.
Number 3, phone-free schools. Get them out of the classroom and hallways.
Mm-hmm.
And number 4, just far more unsupervised play and childhood independence generally, letting kids roam a bit more.
Those are definitely big changes from how things often are today. But it shows the direction the author thinks we need to move in.
And it's good the source notes that parents are trying things, right? Parental controls, looking for dumber phones, setting screen time limits. There's an awareness building.
Absolutely. People are looking for solutions. It also mentions an event, the Alpha Skills Summit 2025.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. Focused on equipping parents and kids with skills for the modern world, not just about tech, but broader life skills.
Like psychology, child development, health, but also critical thinking, empathy, financial literacy, AI literacy.
And even stages focused on specific age groups, like 0-3, talking about early development, and getting kids' voices heard, too.
So a more holistic approach, trying to build resilience and competence alongside managing the tech.
Seems like it. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. As we finish this deep dive, what's the absolute core concern we need to hold on to from this?
I think it's the scale and speed of the impact. This digital environment seems to be having a really profound and potentially negative effect on how young people are developing, on their mental well-being. The data is quite stark.
Yeah. And the key takeaway for me is that shift from childhood being primarily about play, interaction, real-world exploration, to one increasingly mediated through screens. And the consequences of that for social skills, emotional regulation, attention, serious stuff.
Definitely. And that paradox of parenting being maybe too cautious in the real world and not cautious enough online, that's something to really chew on.
It is. Finding that balance is the challenge for everyone, isn't it? Parents, educators, kids themselves.
So a final thought then, for you, the learner, listening
Yeah.
right now, considering everything we've just unpacked, what's one thing about your own relationship with technology, or maybe how you think about childhood today, that you might want to explore a bit more or even reconsider?
Yeah, in this world that's only getting more digital, what does a truly healthy, balanced approach actually look like for young people? And maybe for ourselves, too. It's a big question, and probably one without easy answers.